5 beers and a Coke.
Sir, you're here alone.
No, I'm not.
The lunchtime rush at Harborview Diner was unlike anything Emily Carter had ever seen. Plates clattered against countertops, the coffee machine hissed without pause, and conversations overlapped into a constant hum that filled every corner of the family restaurant. To most people, it was just another busy Tuesday. To Emily, it was another opportunity to earn enough tips to keep the lights on in the tiny apartment she shared with her 10-year-old brother, Noah. At just 23 years old, she had become far more than a waitress. She was a guardian, a provider, and the only family Noah had left after their mother lost her battle with cancer 2 years earlier. Their father had disappeared long before that, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and unpaid bills. Every morning, Emily woke before sunrise, packed Noah's school lunch, walked him to the bus stop, and then hurried to the diner with a smile she had trained herself to wear no matter how exhausted or frightened she felt. Most customers never noticed the tiredness hidden behind her bright eyes. She made sure they didn't. Harborview Diner had a reputation for serving the best burgers in town, but regulars often joked that people really came because of Emily. She remembered birthdays, favorite meals, and even how customers liked their coffee. The elderly widower by the window always received 2 creamers before he asked. The young firefighter who stopped in after every overnight shift never had to order because she already knew he wanted pancakes and black coffee. Emily believed that kindness cost nothing, even when life had taken almost everything from her. It was a lesson her mother had repeated countless times before she passed away. You never know what battle someone is fighting, she used to say. A smile may be the only thing keeping them standing. Emily carried those words with her every day. Just after noon, the cheerful rhythm of the diner changed. The front door opened with its familiar bell, but instead of another family or office worker, a tall man stepped inside with the kind of quiet presence that made conversations soften without anyone knowing why. He looked to be in his early 40s, broad-shouldered and powerfully built, though not in the flashy way of someone trying to impress people. Every movement was calm, measured, almost instinctive. His faded navy t-shirt fit tightly across muscular arms marked by old scars. His boots were dusty, his jeans worn from years of use, and his short-cropped hair revealed a face weathered by sun, wind, and experiences no ordinary life could explain. He carried no backpack, no suitcase, and no phone in his hands. Yet something about him suggested he had traveled a very long way. Without saying a word, the stranger scanned the room with quick, almost invisible glances. He noticed every exit, every window, every person sitting near the doors. It happened so naturally that most customers never realized they were being observed. Emily noticed, though. She had served enough police officers and military veterans to recognize habits that never disappeared after years of service. Whoever this man was, he had spent much of his life preparing for danger. He quietly chose the corner booth facing the entrance. It was the seat with the clearest view of the entire restaurant. Emily grabbed a menu and approached with the same warm smile she offered every guest. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Harborview Diner. My name's Emily, and I'll be taking care of you today." The man nodded politely. "Can I bring you something to drink while you look over the menu?" He didn't even glance at it. Instead, he looked directly into her eyes and spoke 5 words that sounded strangely rehearsed. 5 beers and a Coke. Emily blinked. "I'm sorry." His expression never changed. 5 bottled beers, he repeated quietly, and 1 glass Coke. For a brief second, Emily wondered if she had misheard him. The order wasn't impossible, but something about it felt unusual. A single man sitting alone wanted 5 beers lined up in front of him and only 1 Coke for himself. She smiled politely. "Are friends joining you?" The man paused for just a heartbeat before answering. "They're already here." Emily instinctively glanced around the empty booth. No one else was coming. She looked back at him, expecting a smile that would reveal it was a joke. There wasn't one. His eyes remained fixed on the tabletop as though he could already see people sitting across from him. A small chill ran down Emily's spine. "Of course," she said softly. "I'll be right back." As she walked towards the kitchen, two college students sitting nearby couldn't help laughing. "Guess someone plans on getting completely drunk." Another customer chuckled. "Maybe the Coke's for the designated driver." The comments spread quietly through nearby tables, earning a few amused smiles. Only Emily didn't laugh. Something inside her told her there was nothing funny about that order. Behind the counter, the restaurant owner, Frank Dawson, raised an eyebrow. "5 beers for one guy?" Emily nodded. "And a Coke?" Frank shrugged. "Well, people celebrate strange things." Emily opened the refrigerator and reached for 5 identical bottles of beer. She placed them carefully onto a serving tray instead of carrying them loosely. Then she stopped before pouring the Coke. For reasons she couldn't explain, she ignored the fountain machine and walked to the old display cooler near the back wall. Inside sat classic glass bottles of Coca-Cola, reserved mostly for collectors and nostalgic customers. She chose one. She carefully polished the bottle until it gleamed beneath the restaurant lights. It somehow felt important. When she returned to the booth, conversations around the diner gradually quieted. Curiosity had spread. People discreetly watched from behind coffee cups and newspapers. Emily gently placed the first beer onto the table, then the second, then the third, the fourth, the fifth. Finally, she placed the glass Coke beside them. The 6 drinks stood perfectly in a straight line. The man stared at them without moving. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Emily quietly stepped back, giving him privacy. Suddenly, his right hand began trembling. His breathing became uneven. His shoulders, which had seemed carved from stone only moments earlier, slowly collapsed beneath an invisible weight. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Another followed. Then another. The former soldier lowered his head into his hands. His body shook with silent sobs. The entire restaurant froze. No one laughed anymore. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. The kitchen fell silent. Even the sizzling grill seemed strangely distant. Emily rushed back to the booth. "Sir, are you all right?" The man couldn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and removed a worn leather wallet. From inside, he carefully unfolded an old photograph whose edges had faded with time. Emily couldn't help noticing 6 young men smiling beside a military vehicle somewhere in a desert landscape. 5 held bottles of beer. 1 held a Coke. The man sitting before her was the one holding the Coke. His finger gently rested on each face in the photograph as though introducing old friends. Finally, with a voice barely louder than a whisper, he spoke. "They never let me drink beer before missions." Emily looked at him, confused. "They said someone had to stay responsible." He gave the faintest smile through his tears. "I used to complain every single time." His smile disappeared. "I'd give anything to complain about it one more time." Emily felt her heart tighten. Before she could ask another question, the front door of the diner opened once again. A sharply dressed man in an expensive charcoal suit stepped inside, carrying a leather briefcase. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on the Navy SEAL sitting before the untouched drinks. His expression changed instantly. He walked directly toward the booth. Stopping beside the table, he removed his sunglasses and quietly said words that caused every hair on Emily's arms to stand on end. "I finally found you. Commander, they've been looking for you all morning." The Navy SEAL slowly lifted his head. His face hardened. "What happened?" The suited man's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "It's about Tyler's daughter." Everything changed. Without another word, the Navy SEAL stood, gripping the old photograph tightly in one hand. The 6 untouched drinks remained exactly where they were. Emily stared after him, her mind racing with questions. Who were the 5 men in the photograph? Why did he order drinks for people who weren't there? Who was Tyler? And why did the mention of his daughter seem to erase every trace of grief from the soldier's face? replacing it with urgent determination. Emily had no idea that the answers would pull her into a story of loyalty, sacrifice, and a promise made on a battlefield years earlier. A promise that was about to change both of their lives forever. 5 beers, the Navy SEAL said. The waitress brought 5 beers and a Coke, and he broke down. Emily stood frozen beside the corner booth, watching the tall stranger and the sharply dressed man exchange a look that spoke louder than words. The Navy SEAL slipped the faded photograph back into his wallet with extraordinary care, as though it were the most valuable thing he owned. For a long moment, he didn't move. His eyes drifted toward the 5 untouched beers and the single glass bottle of Coke. His hand rested gently on the table before he whispered, almost too quietly for anyone to hear, "I'll be back, boys. I promised I'd never leave you waiting." Then he turned toward the man in the suit. "What happened to Lily?" he asked. The suited man, whose name Emily would later learn was Daniel Reeves, lowered his voice. "She's in the hospital. The doctors found something during her latest tests. She asked for you before anyone else." The word struck the Navy SEAL like another explosion from a war he thought had ended years ago. His face remained calm, but his eyes betrayed the fear he could no longer hide. Emily instinctively stepped closer. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I know this isn't my business, but if someone's in trouble, maybe I can help somehow." The stranger looked at her for a moment before giving a grateful smile. "Thank you." Most people would have just stared. Emily glanced at the untouched drinks. "I wasn't staring," she replied gently. "I was wondering who they belonged to." For several seconds, the former SEAL remained silent. Finally, he sat back down. "I owe them a proper introduction." He pointed toward the first bottle. "Ryan Foster. The funniest man I've ever known. He could make an entire platoon laugh 5 minutes before the most dangerous mission of our lives." His finger moved to the second. "Marcus Hill, a medic. Saved dozens of lives. He carried extra medical supplies instead of extra ammunition because he believed saving 1 life was a greater victory than taking 10. The third bottle. Ben Walker, father of 2 girls. Every night he wrote letters home, even if he knew he couldn't mail them for weeks. The fourth. Luis Ramirez. He danced whenever he heard music. Didn't matter if it was country, jazz, or children's songs. If it had a beat, he'd dance. Then the fifth. Tyler Brooks. His voice broke. My best friend. The entire diner had fallen completely silent. Customers who had planned to leave after lunch quietly remained seated. Even Frank, the owner, stepped out from behind the counter. The Navy SEAL gently picked up the Coke bottle. "And this one," he smiled sadly, "was always mine." One of the teenage customers who had laughed earlier lowered his eyes in embarrassment. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The Navy SEAL looked at him. "You don't owe me an apology, son. You couldn't have known." He took a slow breath before continuing. "We were deployed together for nearly 6 years. Every mission ended the same way. 5 beers for the team, 1 Coke for me. They never trusted me to drink because I was always the one driving the convoy back to base." A faint laugh escaped several people in the diner. "They called me Grandpa because I followed every rule." Emily smiled. "They sound like good friends." They were family. The smile disappeared. Then came the story none of them would ever forget. It was our final mission together. His eyes no longer saw the diner. They were somewhere else entirely. A routine escort through the mountains. Intelligence said the road was secure. He shook his head. Intelligence was wrong. No one interrupted. Our lead vehicle hit an explosive. The blast trapped us in the valley. His breathing slowed. We fought for nearly an hour while trying to evacuate civilians caught in the crossfire. Daniel quietly placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to tell this." "I do." The Navy SEAL looked around the restaurant. "Because people deserve to know who they were." He continued. Ryan kept everyone laughing until the very end because he believed fear spread faster than bullets. Marcus refused to leave injured children behind even when we begged him to save himself. Ben shielded another soldier without thinking twice. Louise carried an elderly man nearly half a mile because the man couldn't walk. His eyes filled again. And Tyler. The entire room leaned forward. Tyler pulled me out of a burning vehicle. Emily held her breath. I wanted to go back for him. His voice cracked. He shoved me away. The words came slowly now. Take care of Lily, he said. Emily frowned. Lily, my goddaughter. The Navy SEAL nodded. Tyler knew he wasn't coming home. Silence swallowed the diner. He made me promise that his little girl would never grow up feeling abandoned. The promise had guided every year of his life since. He attended every school play, every birthday, every graduation ceremony, every Christmas morning. He taught Lily how to ride a bicycle. He helped with homework. He sat through dance recitals he barely understood. When she cried because she missed the father she couldn't remember, he never lied. Instead, he told stories. Stories about Tyler's kindness, his courage, his terrible singing, his impossible optimism. He deserved to know her, the Navy SEAL whispered. So I made sure she knew him. Emily quietly wiped tears from her face. Does she know today's anniversary? She never forgets. Daniel looked at his watch. We should leave soon. The Navy SEAL nodded but didn't stand. Instead, he reached into his wallet once more. This time he removed 5 folded letters. They wrote these before every deployment. Emily looked puzzled. In case they didn't make it home. He smiled sadly. I've never opened them. The room gasped. You never read them? Emily asked. They weren't written for me. Then who? Their families. Daniel answered quietly. He delivers one every year. Emily stared at him. What do you mean? For 8 years, Daniel explained. He has personally visited every family on this day. He spends time with them, shares stories, helps however he can, then leaves another letter their loved one wrote before deployment. Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. He never wanted recognition, Daniel continued. He used his military pension and most of his savings to keep every promise he made. The elderly customer near the window slowly removed his veteran's cap. Others followed. No one spoke. Respect filled the room more powerfully than applause ever could. Emily looked at the untouched beers once again. They no longer seemed strange. They looked like seats reserved for family. Just then, Daniel's mobile phone rang. He answered. His expression changed immediately. What? He listened for several seconds before looking at the Navy SEAL. They've transferred Lily to emergency surgery. The former SEAL stood instantly. Let's go. He reached for his wallet to pay. Before he could place a single note on the table, Frank stopped him. No. The owner shook his head. Today, your friends eat here for free. One customer stood. Then another. Within seconds, the entire diner rose to their feet. Not to cheer. Not to clap. Simply to honor 6 friends whose bond had survived long after war had ended. The Navy SEAL looked around the room, overcome with emotion. Thank you, he said quietly. But the real heroes, he glanced at the 5 untouched beers, are still sitting at this table. As he and Daniel hurried toward the exit, Emily noticed something lying beneath the old photograph he had accidentally left behind. It was a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in faded handwriting, were just 7 words. Open only if Lily ever needs the truth. Emily picked it up carefully, unaware that the letter inside contained a secret Tyler had hidden from everyone, including the Navy SEAL himself, and that before this day was over, that secret would change all of their lives forever. Emily stood motionless, the sealed envelope resting carefully in her hands. The handwriting on the front was faded but clear. Open only if Lily ever needs the truth. Her heart raced. She hurried outside just as Commander Ethan Cole and Daniel Rees were climbing into a black SUV. Commander, she called. Ethan turned around. You left this. The moment he saw the envelope, every bit of color drained from his face. He walked back slowly, taking it from her with both hands as though it were made of glass. I haven't seen this in 8 years, he whispered. What is it? Emily asked gently. Ethan looked at the writing for several seconds before answering. It's Tyler's last letter. Daniel frowned. I thought he only left letters for his family. He did, Ethan replied. But before our final mission, he handed me this one. He smiled and said, if life goes the way we hope, burn it. If not, only open it when Lily truly needs to know who she is. Daniel's eyes widened. You never opened it? I gave him my word. For 8 years, Ethan had carried the sealed envelope everywhere he went. Today, for the first time, he wondered whether that promise had finally reached its moment. The three of them drove to St. Mary's Hospital in silence. As they entered the children's ward, Ethan immediately spotted 18-year-old Lily Brooks sitting outside the operating theater. She looked exhausted, but the moment she saw him, she stood and threw her arms around him. You came. I'll always come, Ethan replied. Lily had grown into a remarkable young woman. Tyler's kindness lived in her smile, and his determination shone in her eyes. Ethan had watched her take her first steps, taught her to ride a bicycle, and proudly applauded every school performance. To the world, he was simply a family friend. To Lily, he had been the steady presence her father could no longer be. The surgeon soon emerged with reassuring news. The operation went well, he said. She's going to recover. A wave of relief swept over everyone. Later that evening, as Lily rested in her hospital room, Ethan quietly placed the old envelope on the bedside table. I think it's time. Lily looked at the faded handwriting. Is this from Dad? Ethan nodded. It's the last thing he ever gave me. With trembling hands, Lily carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a neatly folded letter and a small silver key taped to the back. She unfolded the paper. Her father's words seemed to fill the room. My dearest Lily, if you're reading this, then life didn't give us the years I dreamed of sharing together. First, know this. I loved you from the moment I first held you, and not a single day passed when I wasn't proud to be your father. If I couldn't be there, it wasn't because I chose to leave. It was because duty sometimes asks ordinary people to make impossible sacrifices. Tears rolled down Lily's face. The letter continued. There is something else you must know. Before every mission, our team agreed on one promise. If one of us didn't come home, the others would become family to those left behind. Ethan never promised me riches. He never promised me success. He promised something far more valuable. He promised you would never feel alone. If he kept that promise, then you'll understand why I've always called him my brother. Lily looked up at Ethan, tears streaming down both their faces. I always wondered why you never missed a birthday. Ethan smiled through his tears. Because your dad would have never missed one. Lily continued reading. The silver key opens a small safety deposit box at Harbor Community Bank. It doesn't hold money. It holds memories, your drawings, photographs, letters your mother and I wrote for your future, and every medal I ever earned. Those medals belong to you, not a museum. They represent sacrifice, but your future should represent hope. The room fell silent. Even the nurses quietly wiped away tears as they passed the open doorway. A week later, after Lily was discharged, Ethan took her to the bank. Inside the small deposit box were dozens of carefully preserved treasures. Crayon drawings from kindergarten, birthday cards, family photographs, a tiny seashell Lily had once given her father, letters written for her 16th birthday, graduation, wedding day, and the birth of her first child. Tyler had prepared for every future milestone he feared he might never witness. Lily cried as she read each one. I thought I lost him. Ethan gently shook his head. No, he never stopped loving you. News of the touching moment at Harborview Diner had quietly spread across the country after one customer shared the story online. Veterans, teachers, nurses, firefighters, and ordinary families began embracing a simple tradition. Whenever they wished to remember someone they had lost, they ordered an extra drink and spent the meal sharing joyful memories instead of silent grief. The movement became known as One More Round. Restaurants everywhere began leaving one empty chair at special remembrance events. Families reunited. Old friends reconnected. Children learned that remembering someone meant celebrating how they lived, not only mourning how they were lost. Months later, Harborview Diner held its first annual remembrance dinner. Every table displayed 6 drinks, 5 beers, 1 Coke. Emily had framed the faded photograph of the 6 smiling soldiers beside a handwritten sign that read, "Heroes live as long as their stories are told." On the first anniversary of Lily's recovery, Ethan returned to the same corner booth. Emily greeted him with a warm smile. "The usual?" He nodded. 5 beers and a Coke. This time, however, something was different. Before Emily could bring the order, customers throughout the diner quietly stood. An elderly veteran carried the first beer. A young firefighter carried the second. A nurse placed the third. A schoolteacher placed the fourth. A teenager, the same young man who had once laughed at Ethan's order, carefully placed the fifth. Finally, Emily set down the Coke. No one spoke. The silence itself became a tribute. Ethan looked around the room, overwhelmed. "I used to think I came here to remember my brothers," he said softly. He glanced at Lily, who was now smiling beside him. "But today I realized something." He rested his hand gently on the table. "They were never really gone. They're alive every time someone chooses kindness instead of judgment, every time a promise is kept, every time a stranger decides to care." He slowly lifted the glass Coke. "To Ryan, to Marcus, to Ben, to Luis, to Tyler, and to every hero whose greatest legacy wasn't the battles they fought, but the lives they changed." Around the diner, glasses quietly rose into the air, not in celebration of war, not in celebration of loss, but in celebration of friendship, sacrifice, loyalty, and hope. As the golden evening sun poured through the windows, 6 untouched drinks reflected the light, like quiet reminders that love does not end with goodbye. Some people leave this world far too soon, but the kindness they inspire, the promises they keep, and the lives they change continue long after they are gone. And somewhere, beyond the reach of time, it almost felt as though 5 old friends were smiling, grateful that one promise, made on a distant battlefield, had become a legacy that would never be forgotten.